The 6-7 crew, ghost ship found. If you like a good short story for your daily commute, or indeed to listen to in the background, hit that like and subscribe button for more stories twice weekly. Hype up this channel to help me create more stories in the future. We were 3 days out and far beyond any friendly coast when the fog drew itself tight around the Morwenna and made the sea sound like a cathedral. The engine throbbed through the deck plates, a steady reminder that something human still lived in the world. But the horizon had been stolen, and the air had that wet felt texture that turns conversation into breath. We had been working a line of deeper water that paid in quiet, heavy lifts, the kind of fishing that takes your shoulders and gives you money back without joy. I remember thinking, as I sipped coffee that had cooled to the taste of metal, that the fog had a shape to it, a kind of waiting poise, as if it were listening for our next decision. We called ourselves the 6-7 crew because a year ago, when everything started to go right for a little while, there were 6 men and 1 woman on board, and the joke stuck. People laughed at the nickname on the quay, and for a while it felt lucky, like a charm hidden under the keel. You do not refuse luck at sea, you do not look too closely at it either. You keep working while it holds. I was in the wheelhouse when the first whisper rose on Channel 16. It was faint and damp and threaded with carrier hiss, a voice with more breath than tone. I turned the volume up with my fingers and looked toward the blank window, as if sound might draw a shape out there. The words swam, then found themselves. "Is anyone there?" That was all. No call sign, no position, just the old phrasing you get from training manuals and nerves. "Is anyone there?" Robbie, who handled deck like he was born with lines for tendons, stuck his head in. He had the open, innocent face of a man who still expected the sea to tell the truth. "You hear that, Hawk?" I nodded and took the mic. "Morwenna on 1-6, say again, over." It came back like someone breathing into a bottle. "Is anyone there? Please advise, we require assistance." I reached for the GPS, saw the position and the range circles, felt the strange vertigo of knowing where you are and having no idea at all. Out here, international waters beyond the regulated lanes, radio can be a ghost in its own right. I tried again. "Station calling on 1-6. Identify. What is your position?" Silence grew in the room, like a mist on top of mist. Then something like a rattle, the sound of paper being turned. A different voice came through, brighter, oddly formal, like a classroom recitation. "Research vessel Silver Haven requesting immediate boarding assistance. Our people are unwell." I wrote the words down on a pad and stared at them. The name did not sit right. It had weight, the way an old bell has weight when you hear it. Robbie said the name out loud, and everyone else drifted closer, as if proximity could make the sound less cold. I keyed the mic. "Silver Haven, copy, state your last known position, state your condition, over." No coordinates came back, just a soft, almost courteous reply. "Come to me, come to me." I let the mic fall against the cord and swing, a small pendulum tapping the console. Kira stepped into the wheelhouse then, our 7th, her hair tucked under a watch cap that had seen a decade of salt. She had that serious look she gets when something in the weather is wrong deep down, not in the clouds. "Let me hear it again," she said. I repeated the call, kept it professional. Nothing answered. The fog thickened without moving. I could feel my crew behind me, gathered in a line of eyes, waiting for sense to form. "Silver Haven," I tried once more. "This is fishing vessel Morwenna. We can assist if you give us a bearing." We did not get a bearing. We got a shape. It rose out of the whiteness with a tenderness that felt obscene. A superstructure first, then a long clean bow, the flanks of a research hull with the paint weathered to the color of dead shells. The name was there in white letters, still crisp, still arrogant. Silver Haven. She was not small, and she made the Morwenna feel suddenly narrow and mortal. She drifted without corrections, a slow, steady slide through the silk fog, and as she passed our beam, I felt my stomach fold as if I had swallowed ice. She looked well kept, almost prim, but she was wrong in that way that makes your spine try to leave your body, as if every line had been drawn by someone who had learned boats from a dream. We circled and made fast. The deck of the Silver Haven was slick with frost, though the air was no colder than an ordinary bad day. I have spent my life on surfaces that carry stories in their dirt, but her decks carried the story of absence. No footprints, no scuffs, no dropped tools, nothing that said a living body had done a living thing. The 6-7 crew stood in a small close knot by the rail, and we looked at each other without blinking. You do not say, "This is wrong," not at first. You try to let the world correct itself. Kira said, "We answer calls. We go." Her voice did not shake. We went. The jump across was longer than it should have been, a polite gap that turned into an appetite while you were mid-air. My boots hit her deck, and I felt a hum in the steel that had no right to be there. The engine room, I thought. Someone has left something running. I turned to help the others over. When Kira landed beside me, she kept her hand on my sleeve for a beat too long. The ladder to the main deck level was open, and the interior door stood ajar, as if we had been expected. "Morwenna," I said into the handheld boarding Silver Haven. "Stand by." My own voice sounded like a stranger who had borrowed my throat. We went in with the careful speed of people who respect the way metal can take its time. Corridors wide enough to carry equipment. Lights that should have been dead but were dimly alive, as if the ship had been holding her breath for years and was now allowing herself a sip. The air smelled not of rot, not of oil, not of human things, but of frost and paper. In the galley we found 4 cups clustered around a table with a ring of charts spread under them. The coffee in the cups was warm. Kira touched the side of one and did not pull away. She held her fingers there and closed her eyes. "She is running a memory," she said. Her voice was almost calm. There was a logbook on the counter with neat handwriting that turned frenetic halfway through a page. I read it aloud because reading alone in that room would have been like climbing into a grave and pulling the lid down. Silver Haven, longitude, latitude, the kind of detail that believes it can keep the sea from being itself. Then a change, unusual bioacoustic returns. Contact believed to be cetacean in origin. Repeating signal, phrase like cadence, possible anthropogenic source. Crew reports auditory artifacts. Then a broken sentence, written hard enough that the pen cut the paper. "She is inside." Inside what? Inside who? Robbie picked up the kettle and poured water into the sink, and it came out in a slow, milky stream, as if the ship were bleeding her memory into the basin. He set it down without looking at it. Kira moved to the radio, an old set that did not match the sleek consoles on the bridge. She turned the knob. It came alive with a soft, domestic, near sound, like cloth rubbing against cloth. "Morwenna," said a voice that was mine. "Morwenna, do you copy? We are aboard the Silver Haven. Stand by." I looked at the handheld in my hand, the one I had used 2 minutes ago. I had not transmitted that last sentence in that tone. I asked a question, and the radio had answered for me in my own mouth. We left the galley for the engine room because I had to see what the hum was. It pleased me, the idea that I could fix something, that I could touch tools and bring truth back with grease. The access hatch was heavy but cooperative. We descended into a space that was clean in a way I have only seen in rooms where people fear the thing they have built. The engines were silent, an expensive identity humming only as a memory in the frame. The fuel drums were neatly stacked and the gauge on the pipeline read dry. I ran my hand along a rail that should have been greasy, and it was cold and polished, as if many fingers had smoothed it for years while begging for a different result. "You said she was running," Kira said behind me, but she said it without accusation, like a nurse who does not blame a fever for being hot. I listened. The hum did not come from machinery. It came from the ship herself, a low, sympathetic vibration, like the voice you use to soothe a child that is not there. We stood quietly. The hum did not change. A pulse lived in it that made you think of a heart and then reject the thought because you did not want to humanize it. We moved forward. The 6-7 crew fanned into the ship with the necessary stubbornness of people who cannot admit they are afraid while their feet are moving. We were not reckless. We spoke our locations. We paired off. We carried our sense of procedure like a small candle. If you have never boarded a vessel like this, you might assume the fear is of people with knives, or of bad air, or of cables underfoot. There is that. But there is also the fear of a story that has already been written in a language you do not know, and that you are about to star in a middle chapter. On the starboard passage near the lab space, something broke the air. It was small and light and could only have been a child, the way it flitted and paused and flitted again. Robbie swore in a voice like a whisper shouted. I turned and caught the after-image of a figure in an orange life jacket, hair plastered to a small skull, bare feet. That is not possible, Kira said, not like an objection but like a note in a ledger. We followed. The passage turned and turned again, took us past two identical sets of sample freezers, two identical racks of neatly labeled cylinders. I found myself back at the first freezer, certain of it, because I recognized a tiny scratch on the door handle, the shape of a map of Cornwall if the maker had been drunk. We had looped without looping. We stood in the same place, having taken different steps. The hum had a smile in it then, a private satisfaction. We called out. No one answered, not with words. The overhead speaker in the corridor exhaled. A voice that could have been a woman or a weather engine said, stand by, all crew to the bridge. It sounded like an announcement for a drill. It sounded like an invitation to a meal. It sounded like our deaths asking us to be punctual. On the bridge, the windows looked out into a fog that had thickened into substance. It did not sit beyond the glass, it abutted it. It pressed itself there like cloth against skin. The helmsman's chair was empty. The wheel was held in the hands of the ghost of a decision. The radar screen glowed with a trace that made no sense. A single bright return in the center, our own position, and then concentric rings, like the ones you draw on paper to show echo tests, and everything moving. I put my hand on the wheel out of politeness. It was cool and pliant, as if skin. There was a bank of Polaroids tacked to a corkboard. You might think I would not notice them, but when you are counting your breaths, your eyes notice anything with faces. Crew photos. On deck with a sun that looked honest. In hard hats by a winch, smiling the way people smile before they learn something that changes their faces forever. A woman with cropped hair and a fierce jaw. A man with freckles like a map. A child visiting, being held by someone proud. Then a row near the bottom, fresher, the corners still intent on curling. I could taste sick even before I registered what I was seeing. US, the 6-7 crew, caught at odd angles, doing things we had just done, and in one, looking out of the frame like we wanted to say something and had not found it yet. Kira reached out on instinct and turned one of the photos over. On the back, in the same neat logbook hand, was a date from the 1980s and a note. New rotation. Good workers. The writing had been pressed with care. I took the photo from her and put it back because I could not admit that object and time had stopped doing what they owed me. The ship spoke then, not through speakers, but through every piece of metal. All crew to stations, all crew prepare to secure, we are taking on water. There was no water. The floor was dry. The hum rose. The fog beyond the windows darkened by one shade, as if a giant hand had turned a dimmer. I took the mic and said words that should have rearranged the world for the better. Silver Haven, this is Hawk Hensley of the Morwenna. We are aboard. We will assist. Where are your people? The answer came with gentleness, the voice of someone who has already grieved and can afford to be kind to you. We are at stations, Captain Hensley. Thank you for your prompt response. Please take your place. She knew my name. My mouth went dry. Kira did not look at me. She was looking at the compass. I followed her eyes and saw the needle spin without friction, then pause, then spin the other way. The direction did not exist. The fog outside had acquired a surface. It was no longer air. It was ocean. It lay where the sky should have been. It reflected nothing. It asked us to walk. Movement on the ladder. A figure took the top rung and paused. A man who was not a man anymore because he had too much stillness in all the wrong places. He wore an old captain's sweater, the heavy knit kind that used to be navy blue, but looked like winter now. His beard was neat. His eyes were polite. You answered, he said, and I knew the shape of his mouth when he was tired, because he had my mouth and I had his. We were of a kind. He was not there, and yet he was, as solid as the wheel and as impossible as the hum. He looked at each of us, a roll call with love and apology. The sea asked for us long ago, he said, and we said yes. You should have said no. Behind him, a klaxon sounded, though not at the volume you would expect in a crisis. It was almost beautiful. the bridge lights dimmed by one thoughtful degree. Kira stepped toward the man, not like a challenge, but like a person who has missed a step that her feet remember. "What is this?" she said. He answered as if to a child he loved. "We were called, and we came, and we agreed to be remembered. She is inside us. She wants a complete crew. She plays the last night over and over until it is right." "Who is she?" I asked, and my throat hurt. He looked beyond us into the fog where the horizon had gone to school. He looked without moving his head. "She is what we hunted and what we made. She is the voice that says, 'Is anyone there?' She is the answer. She is the thing you cannot study without becoming a page in the book. You cannot free her by understanding her. You can only leave her if you finish her story." I do not know what courage is. I know only the quiet willingness to do the next necessary thing without hating yourself. We did the next necessary thing. We went to stations. Because that is what he asked, and he spoke like our fathers. The ship took us where she wanted. Robbie to the winch, Nash to the lines, Oates to the engine panel that did not run anything, Kira to the radio, a pen in her hand that began to write without looking at the paper. Me to the wheel. My hands found the same cool, pliant feel as before. The man stood near the chart table and nodded, not as a ghost, but as a captain who accepts how you have set the sails. The fog beyond the glass thickened to black. Not the black of night, but the black of velvet pressed to your eyes by someone who loves you and has to hurt you. The hum turned into a low chord that I knew in my teeth. The floor tilted 3 degrees. The speakers said, "Water ingress portside, secure all, ready pumps," and the phrase "ready pumps" made me laugh in a quiet way that was not funny, because there were no pumps to ready, and yet we had just checked them. The radio jumped with a snatch of a voice that was me, older, saying, "This is Hawk Hensley of the Morwenna. We require assistance." The loop closed in my ears with a tight small click. We enacted the night. That is the closest I can come to the truth. We did the tasks that the original crew had done, and we did them in their sequence, and the ship approved or disapproved by adjusting the hum. When we moved wrong, the corridor doubled, and we found ourselves back where we started, as if an editor had cut the shot and told us to try again. When we moved right, a door unlocked that had never had a lock. We worked with intelligence and with submission. We were a good crew. We were the 6-7 crew. At some point, and it could have been minutes or a week, the fog outside changed from velvet to mirror. The world was a sheet of black glass. The Silver Haven moved through it without wake. The Morwenna lay alongside, tethered by 2 ropes that had not chafed even one fibre. I could see her humble lines through a slit in the fog, and it felt like seeing your own grave, and also your kitchen table with the sun on it. The man in the sweater opened a drawer in the chart table and took out a flare pistol. He passed it to me with courtesy. I did not take it. He laid it on the table and showed me the chart that was not a chart, full of concentric rings and no land. Then he looked at me with the same face my father had when he taught me to tie a bowline and told me, quietly, "There will be something you do not wish to do, and you must do it anyway, because you love the people you are responsible for." He said, "She keeps the others if even one of us refuses. She wants a complete picture. She wants a crew who knows it is a crew. The leaving is not an escape, Captain, it is a conclusion." Kira's pen scratched the same sentence again and again on the log page. "The 6-7 crew are aboard." She did not look at the words she made. Her eyes were on me, and they were asking a question I knew the answer to from the moment we crossed over. I am a fisherman. I am not a hero. The things I have been brave about were the things that did not allow for cowardice. I looked at the man in the sweater, and it occurred to me that he had stayed a very long time so that someone like me could learn this sentence. You cannot force the sea to keep what is not hers, but you can choose how you are taken. The only way out was through. I told them to the boat. The words tasted like iron filings. I told them we would take the Morwenna off the haven by cutting lines clean and letting drift decide, and that I would see them back, and that this was procedure, and that I loved them, though the last I did not say out loud because that word can break things you want to keep whole for the last minute. We went down together because pretending safety alone would have been a sin. The corridors made sense for once, as if the ship were interested in our punctuality. On deck the frost still held, a thin glaze that reflected our shapes with loving inaccuracy. We moved along the rail like a thought. The Morwenna waited, her paint humble, her windows ordinary and honest. Our lines ran across the gap like umbilicals. Oates took the knife to the first line and looked at me for permission, and I nodded, and he severed history with one clean motion. The gap widened by an inch. The hum rose. Robbie cut the second line. The Morwenna began to slide away, her engine already ticking because we had left her ready, like you leave a horse with the reins looped. Kira looked at me, and I put my hand on her shoulder. She put hers on my chest, and for a second we were not at sea at all. We were in a kitchen with morning light and a radio talking about weather, and there was a loaf on the table, and I had flour on my fingers. I do not have flour on my fingers when I am at sea. The ship gave that memory as a gift or a lure. I let it pass through me and go. Go, I said. She shook her head no once, quickly, and then she climbed back over because she was better than me at doing what had to be done. The others followed her, even Robbie, who had never looked away from me when things got bad, and then he did. Because that is how friendship sometimes saves your life, it refuses to look. I stepped back from the rail. The man in the sweater was there. He did not smile, but the lines around his eyes accepted me. Somewhere a bell that had not been cast yet rang once. Back in the wheelhouse, I lifted the flare pistol. It had a weight that belonged in a different world, the world of shore, of fences, of warnings sent up to be admired. I opened the breech, checked the cartridge, closed it with a click that felt like a door shutting behind you in a house you have paid for. The chart with its rings waited under my hand. The compass needle shivered like a trapped insect, and then lay still, pointing nowhere because nowhere was everywhere. I did not speak to the ship. She was listening anyway. I fired the flare. It did not cross air. It crossed a thought. It buried itself in the idea of oxygen and wrote a line of red there, and then it kept writing until the red became a circle, and then the circle became a mouth, and the mouth opened and swallowed the flare, and then the mouth lowered to the deck of the Silver Haven and bit. Fire took the ship the way a story takes a child. There was no smoke. There was only light, new and clean, like the first day after rain. The hum turned to a single tone and then to silence. A helm without a hand has a way of believing itself. The ship began to turn, a slow, dignified wheelhouse pivot, until the bow faced the place where the fog was blackest. It was polite to the last. The man in the sweater stood with his hand on the chart table, and he nodded to me once. And in that nod I felt the weight leave my chest, because he was not asking anything from me anymore. He was thanking me, and I had not known how much I wanted that. The Silver Haven slid forward and down. Not a capsize, not a plunge, but a gentle acceptance. The deck under my boots tilted by degrees. Outside the glass, the Morwenna moved away in good order, her wake a bright seam in the black mirror. I thought I could hear Kira on the radio, saying my name, the way people say it when the word is heavier than a body. I kept my hands instead of answering. The wheel wanted small corrections, and I gave them. The chart asked for a fingertip to hold it flat, and I gave it. The hum did not return. The ship and I had reached the end of our rehearsal. Water came over the deck in a single shy sheet. The lights went down to ember. The window filled with black and then with nothing. I thought of an afternoon years ago when I had walked home along a lane with hedges and the air smelled of cow parsley and petrol. I thought of the way my father used to put his hand on my head as if weighing me. I thought of Kira laughing with her eyes. I thought of the 6-7 crew standing on the Morwenna's deck with their hands tight on rail and rope and the engine turning like a heart with a job. I did not feel the moment the sea claimed me. It was not a bruise, it was not a hand, it was not even cold. It was a change of sentence. When I opened my eyes, I was in a room that knew my name. Not a room, not a deck, a place where ideas go to be kept. The man in the sweater was there. He was young and old. He was a photograph I did not remember taking. He said, "Thank you, Captain," and I said, "Please," and he said, "We will be remembered correctly now," and I said, "Will that help?" And he said, "It helps the telling," and I understood that the telling was a kind of salvation even if the teller is gone. You want to know about the Morwenna. You want to know if they got clear. You want the piece of news the human heart insists on as if facts could cheat grief. I cannot give you that, not from here, not from this polite absence. I can tell you that the sea noticed their leaving with a courtesy that might have been mercy. I can tell you that the fog thinned sooner than a map would suggest. I can tell you that a month after all this, a fisherman in waters a long way from any coast heard a voice on Channel 16, and it was mine, asking, "Is anyone there?" And that is not a tragedy, that is the shape of a circle drawn right. Because sometimes the story of your ending is the way you keep a hand on the tiller of the living. They say later, in papers that never reach certain ports, that the Morwenna made it back with a story they would not sign their names to. They say the Coast Guard logged a call from coordinates that lay in no water anyone recognized. They say the Silver Haven never existed except in the mind of one retired watch officer whose father once worked on her and kept a coffee mug with the logo until his wife threw it out. They say lots of things because human mouths cannot stay closed when the dark is kind enough to step back for an hour and let the light say its piece. I can only tell you how it felt when the 6-7 crew stepped onto the Silver Haven and how the ship treated us like people she had been waiting for. How she held us in a story that was meticulous and uncruel. How she asked politely for a conclusion. The sea can be cruel. The sea can be a loving archivist. If you live long enough with her, you learn to hear the difference. That night, out in international waters where treaties and prayers do not quite reach, we were recorded carefully. We were written down with good penmanship. The dates are wrong, but the feeling is accurate. So if on a fog-bound morning, far from any friendly coast, you hear a voice that sounds like your own, asking if anyone is there, answer with the courtesy your grandfather would approve. Say your name, say your vessel, say your position, and do not ask for hers. The voice will thank you. The sea will touch the hull like a dog greeting a boot. You will feel a hum in the metal that is not the engine. You will put your hand to the wheel, and it will be cool and pliant. You will look out at a window that is a mirror, and you will understand how a life can be both ordinary and myth in the same afternoon. You will remember me, and that will be enough for both of us. We were the 6-7 crew. We went where we were called. We finished the story as it was written, and then we let it end. If you have to write us down, if you have to make a log somewhere, write this. We answered. We were kind. We were brave where bravery is only the name you give to professionalism in bad weather. And if you find a photograph curled by thumbprints and pinned to a corkboard on a ship no one remembers building, and our faces look out of the frame like we are about to speak, do not turn it over. Do not look for the date. Dates are a sure thing. Put the photo back. Touch the edge of the board with 2 fingers. Go to your station when the hum asks. When the question rises, is anyone there, and you are, say yes, and know what you are consenting to. The sea loves an answer. The sea is a library of long answers. I am filed under Silver Haven now, in a stack you cannot see, in a drawer that opens when fog goes from weather to architecture. Sometimes, when the tone is very low and the black is very black, I can feel the Morwenna drift by as if in memory. And I think I smell flour and coffee, and I think I hear Kira say my name with that weight, and it is good. The end does not need to be cruel to be final. It only needs to be completed. Out there the lanes go nowhere and everywhere. Out there the waves fold time the way a hand folds a letter. Out there a child in an orange life jacket turns a corner and is always just about to be found. Out there a man in a sweater with a good jaw helps someone fire a flare into a mouth that is not fire at all, but an appetite for narrative. And if sometimes, on nights that have no people on them, a bell sounds once for no reason, it is not loneliness. It is acknowledgement. I was Hawk Hensley. I am Captain Hensley of the research vessel Silver Haven. I am a voice that has been trained to speak politely on Channel 16. I am a fisherman who made peace with a sentence. Someone once wrote in a log, "She is inside," and they were right, and it is not as terrible as it sounds. The sea is inside anyone who gives her their work. What happened to us is only a more careful version of that. Is anyone there? Yes, always.